This was a relatively easy flip. Welcome to Haynes on Hoop. This is Quentin Haynes, and I wanted to talk about the recent trade between the Cleveland Cavaliers and the Chicago Bulls. Pretty simple. The Bulls trade Lonzo Ball to Cleveland for Isaac Okoro. Most of this is going to be Cavaliers and Lonzo based, but I did want to hit on the Chicago Bulls side of things. I don't understand what the Bulls are doing. Okoro is a good defender, but limited offensively, so it impacts his value both as a current asset and as a potential playoff asset. I don't think he'll ever shoot well enough from three to really matter and be a real trade piece the level Lonzo Ball was before this trade, right? So I don't understand what he does for the Bulls. I guess he gives you another regular season defensive piece, and for a Bulls team that prioritizes making the play-in, acquiring playoff revenue, maybe that helps. But I just think it was a bad trade for the Bulls. If I am a Chicago fan, I'm disappointed because I do think that the Bulls' practice here was correct. It's just the end point was wrong, right? They kept Lonzo in place. They made it so that he can return. He comes back. We'll talk about his performance when he came back in a bit. But you see the writing on the wall. You sign him to a 2-year, $20 million deal. You get some value back on that deal. All of a sudden, in this climate where teams have to be creative with the second apron looming, with the first apron looming, you have a 2-year, $20 million asset that when he's healthy, he can really play, right? And then you trade it for a guy that just is a good defender, and that's it. It's very reminiscent to the Alex Caruso for Josh Giddey trade in that you have this asset in Caruso. It's becoming apparent that he's going to be traded. Teams are going to line up assets, and before you can even get that opportunity to figure out what the landscape is and try to make a move, you just flip him for Josh Giddey. Now, presumably the Bulls will re-sign Giddey here in the next couple of days, and that'll be their quote-unquote franchise guard. But I don't like the end point here. Everything kind of sets up well for the Bulls. You sign Caruso to a good contract, you maintain his value, but then you don't trade him at the right time. And they had this with Andre Drummond as well when he was there. There was a deal where they could have got 4 second-round picks for him, and they didn't pull the trigger. I'm not sure what's going on in Chicago, but as much as we talk about New Orleans, right, and a lot of people trash New Orleans for their draft day trade, and I saw a couple of tweets that said that the NBA should step in on New Orleans once again. I think if we're being real, the NBA should step in on Chicago and try to figure out what's going on and what the grand point of all this is. Because it just feels like they're spinning their wheels. And I actually thought they made a good pick last in the draft, but overall, I'm just not a fan of this. And they continue to get these assets, and you're not even getting any quality on the back end, right? Like, you didn't get 2 second-round picks to where you can go and potentially add a guy and potentially hit on somebody, even though now the Bulls are more known for trading their second-round picks for cash. It's just a frustrating part. And if you're a Bulls fan, I can't imagine how frustrated you've been over the last really 25 years. And as just an outsider, it's just weird how some teams operate like this and we hear nothing from the front office or the NBA in general about some of these practices. It's just pretty poor, you know. Outside of trading him and attaching a first-round pick, this deal couldn't have been any worse for Chicago. I feel for the Bulls fans because I do have some Bulls fans in my life, but I just think it was a poor trade from the Chicago perspective. Cleveland. I want to get to Cleveland here. First off, I think the Cavaliers look really good, right? You have Donovan Mitchell. Darius Garland's out for some time, so Lonzo might get more minutes than you think, right? But when they're all healthy, it's Garland, Mitchell. You added DeAndre Hunter, who was okay after the trade. You have Jared Allen. You have Evan Mobley. I'm curious if they re-sign Ty Jerome. I would if I was Cleveland. I think he had a poor enough postseason where maybe you can get him back on a little bit of a sweetheart deal there. I think the Cavaliers in general saw Jason Tatum go down, Damian Lillard go down, Tyrese Halliburton go down, and said we need to continue to bump up the ceiling as well as the floor of this team. And I think Lonzo Ball does a lot of that. I just want to talk about Lonzo in general because, truth be told, I was writing a video about him. I was writing a script for a video about him being the most interesting free agent, and then he gets traded shortly before editing. He averaged 7.6 points, 3.4 rebounds, 3.3 assists, and a true shooting percentage of 52.4. I think that those numbers aren't great. When you consider he hasn't played for 2 years, that's fine, right? I think the most interesting thing is that once he returned, 80% of his shots were from outside. 32% on catch and shoot threes, not great, but I'm curious to see what it looks like a year removed. I'm curious what it looks like with a little bit more levity and gravity in terms of a guy like Evan Mobley, and Jared Allen's vertical spacing, Donovan Mitchell being one of the more electric offensive players. I'm curious to see how he fits in that system where there are multiple threats on the floor. If that catch and shoot number can improve a little bit, and overall, if he continues to improve as an outside shooter, his weakness offensively is his lack of athleticism, lack of driving and getting past people. So it makes some of his mid-range to inside shots difficult. If it's not an easy look, it's a bad shot for Lonzo Ball. But this guy played really well defensively, and I think that's the key thing for this trade, right? He's still 6'6", lengthy wingspan. He's going to be able to pester ball handlers on the perimeter. He's not an elite defender in the way of the best way I can describe it is like with a strong safety in football, where historically the strong safety comes down, makes hits. In today's modern football, they play more linebacker sometimes, and they're just aggressive on the attack. Whereas the free safety is more the smart one, creative, making the plays, has to see the play before the play eventually unfolds. That's the kind of defender Lonzo Ball is. To be a little bit more direct, he's more of a smart defender with his basketball IQ. He can see the play before the play occurs, right? And you see it in his defensive numbers. He had a 1.4 defensive plus minus, which placed him in the 91st percentile. He had a 2.7 steal percentage, which was good for the 93rd percentile. 1.7 block percentage, even coming off the injuries, was good for the 61st percentile. The Bulls were 9 points better with Lonzo Ball on the floor defensively. I just think this is a guy who, as teams continue to kind of brush up but avoid the first and second apron, or kind of make moves to kind of duck those penalties, like this is a guy who kind of fills in a bunch of different margins, right? So I'm interested to see how his passing and his creativity works with a guy like Evan Mobley. That's just another guy that can pass and get the ball into better shots for Kenny Atkinson. That's just another guy who, if he can shoot the ball well, that's another floor spacer for you. I think defensively, you have I call them events guys, so the guys that get a lot of blocks, a lot of steals, that generate a lot of turnovers and stops, right? Between Allen, Mobley, Donovan Mitchell had an underrated defensive season. He really took pride on that side of the floor. I think DeAndre Hunter is an even level defender. I don't think he takes off the floor more than what he gives, so he's probably pretty even there. I think Darius Garland's a bad defender, but Darius Garland's also like about 6'3", 6'4". I think he's 6'2". But, he's not completely diminutive that he's just like Trae Young in terms of his defensive ability, right? So now you kind of have the pieces to kind of take another step forward defensively, which would be huge for Cleveland. I think the Cavaliers are in a position where it's just like, everything here works. You just want to get to that point where you start seeing the end result, right? Getting, the Cavaliers-Pacers series, it's tough because the Pacers were one of the best teams in the league from from January on. So it's kind of tough to just really kill the Cavaliers for that. But you also saw some of the shortcomings in those games, and what the Cavaliers essentially need is just one or two more guys that can take pressure off their playoff players, their top four. And I think Lonzo Ball kind of does that, right? And I think in the regular season, I'm curious to see about the maintenance for him. One of the things is that, this guy, I don't think you can play him like 30 minutes a night. I think he's someone who's probably in that 22 to 27 level band. And what does that mean for him in the postseason? Can he ramp it up? The games are now coming back to back to back to back. Can he play in all of them? I think those are the bigger concerns about Lonzo. And for all the plaudits that I'm giving him, a lot of these numbers that I'm reading were in a season where he played under 1,000 minutes. So I think the Cavaliers ultimately won the trade. I think they won big here because I find Lonzo to be such an interesting talent. There's not too many players like him in the history of the NBA, let alone in today's current game, but I also think that there's clear concerns about what he can bring if he can't stay on the floor. I'm I'm a little bit more hopeful that Kenny Atkinson and this Cleveland coaching staff kind of understands that, hey, we know he can't play that many games. We know there's just going to be games where he's not available, and they kind of manage him correctly leading up to the playoffs, properly ramp him up in March and April when the games are a little bit less important and there's a little bit of a lower level of play there. So overall, I mean, this is pretty brief. I think the Bulls is more concerned about Chicago moving forward. I just don't think they'll ever get there. It feels like the front office led by Arturas Konashovitz, I think that kind of needs to end. I think they need to blow it up, but I feel like saying the Bulls need to blow it up is such a basic take. I won't progress from there, right? It's just the Bulls are a team of concern. I don't feel like they've improved. I don't feel like things are going well there. I don't know how they fix it. Meanwhile, the Cavaliers, a team that's currently in their contending band, who just saw the Celtics get knocked out, who just saw the Pacers get knocked out, who just saw the Bucks kind of fall back. The only team they're competing with right now, if you look from last season moving forward, before any moves are made, are the Knicks. And they beat the Knicks, I believe, 3 times by like double digits each time. So it's just like the Cavaliers, the front office, everyone understands that there is a path where this team's not only going to be a top team in the East, but probably the favorites to come out of the conference. So they need to prepare properly. And I think the DeAndre Hunter trade during the season, during the trade deadline, was a good precursor to doing that. Now you kind of have 6, 7 guys that you feel secure with. If they can bring back Ty Jerome, that would be great. You have young players like a Jalen Tyson, potentially you can develop and get him into a potential role. Overall, I think the Cavaliers are moving forward to be considered the best team in the Eastern Conference, and this move only solidifies that. Agree? Disagree? Let me know in the comments. This is Quentin Haynes. Thank you for listening.